Before we begin, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment which city you're watching from. It really helps us continue sharing these stories. I'm sharing this story because I believe many people have experienced what it feels like to be invisible in their own family, not through violence or dramatic confrontations, but through silence, through carefully chosen words, through the slow realization that your place at the table was never really yours. This isn't about revenge. It's about understanding when it's time to stop waiting for people to see you and start seeing yourself clearly instead. Well, now that Robert is gone, we can finally get back to being a real family again. My aunt. Before we begin, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment which city you're watching from. It really helps us continue sharing these stories. I'm sharing this story because I believe many people have experienced what it feels like to be invisible in their own family, not through violence or dramatic confrontations, but through silence, through carefully chosen words, through the slow realization that your place at the table was never really yours. This isn't about revenge. It's about understanding when it's time to stop waiting for people to see you and start seeing yourself clearly instead. Well, now that Robert is gone, we can finally get back to being a real family again. My Aunt Patricia said it during the reception while holding a small plate of finger sandwiches, her voice just loud enough to carry across the church basement. She wasn't whispering, she wasn't trying to hide it. She said it the way someone might comment on the weather. Casual, matter-of-fact, surrounded by at least a dozen relatives who simply nodded or looked away. I was standing 15 feet from her, still wearing the black suit I'd borrowed from a colleague because I couldn't afford to buy one. My father's casket had been lowered into the ground less than 2 hours ago. The dirt was still fresh on my hands from when I'd thrown in that first handful, the way you're supposed to, the way sons do. But apparently, I wasn't that anymore. Nobody corrected her. Nobody even flinched. My Uncle Martin, my father's younger brother, actually chuckled softly and said something I couldn't quite hear, but it made Patricia smile. My cousin Derek, who I'd spent childhood summers with, stared down into his coffee cup like it held the secrets of the universe. My mother stood near the far wall, talking with the priest, her back perfectly turned to me. I felt my throat tighten, but I didn't move, didn't speak, didn't react. I just stood there, holding a paper cup of lukewarm coffee, watching my family erase me in real time. The thing is, I should have seen it coming. For years, I'd felt it. The distance, the subtle exclusions, the way conversations would pause when I entered a room and resume in a slightly different tone. But I'd always told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid, that blood was thicker than all the small snubs and cold shoulders. I was wrong. My father, Robert, had been the only bridge between me and them. He was the one who insisted I come to Christmas dinners, who called me every Sunday, who introduced me to people as my son with a kind of stubborn pride that didn't match the way the rest of the family looked at me. He was a union electrician, a man with rough hands and a soft heart, and he loved me even when I made choices he didn't fully understand. When I told them I wasn't going to take over the family's small construction business, the one my grandfather started, the one my uncles expanded, my father had been disappointed, but he'd accepted it. He'd even helped me move to Portland when I got the job at the nonprofit. The rest of them never forgave me for it. He thinks he's too good for us, I'd overheard my uncle say once, years ago at a barbecue. Gets himself some college degree and suddenly manual labor isn't respectable enough. That wasn't it. It was never about that. I just wanted something different. I wanted to work with communities, to help people navigate social services, to do something that felt like it mattered, in a way I could see. But to them, leaving the family business was the same as leaving the family. And now that my father was gone, they were making it official. I looked around the church basement, the folding tables covered in white paper, the store-bought cookies arranged on plastic trays, the coffee urn that someone had brought from the parish kitchen. There were about 40 people there,
mostly extended family, a few of my father's co-workers, some neighbors from the old block. Everyone was talking in that hushed, polite way people do at funerals, exchanging small comforts and shared memories. But nobody was talking to me. I'd been standing alone for 20 minutes. When I'd arrived at the funeral home that morning, I'd tried to stand with my mother near the casket, the way family does. She'd looked at me with red, swollen eyes and said, "Maybe you should sit in the third row. The first two are for immediate family." Immediate family.
I was his son, his only son, but I sat in the third row. During the service, my Uncle Martin gave the eulogy. He talked about my father's dedication to the family, his work ethic, his loyalty. He mentioned my cousins by name, Derek, who worked in the business now, and Stephanie, who just had her second baby. He talked about my mother's strength, about my Aunt Patricia's support during my father's final months in hospice. He never said my name, not once. 40 minutes of memories, stories, laughter, and tears, and I was a ghost in my own father's funeral. I thought maybe it was an oversight. Maybe grief had scrambled his thoughts. Maybe he just forgot. But then Patricia said what she said, and I understood. It wasn't an accident. I watched her now, across the room, laughing softly with my cousin Stephanie, bouncing Stephanie's toddler on her hip. She looked so comfortable, so certain of her place. She'd always been the loud one, the one who organized family gatherings, who decided who got invited and who didn't, who was in and who was out. My father used to call her the sheriff as a joke, but it wasn't really a joke. She ran the family like a small government, and apparently I'd just been voted out. I felt a presence next to me and turned. It was Father Gregory, the priest who'd performed the service. He was an older man, maybe 70, with kind eyes and a thick Irish accent that still clung to his words after 50 years in the States. "You hold him up, son?" he asked quietly. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He looked at me for a long moment, then glanced around the room. "Family's a complicated thing," he said, "especially at times like these." "Yeah," I managed. "Your father spoke about you often, you know. When I'd visit him at the hospice, he was very proud of the work you do." I felt something crack inside my chest. "Thank you, Father." "Don't let them take that from you," he said, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. Then he patted my shoulder and moved on to comfort someone else. I stood there, watching the reception continue around me like I was behind glass. My mother finally approached me about 10 minutes later. She looked exhausted, her face pale beneath the makeup someone had helped her apply. She was only 62, but she looked much older now, hollowed out by grief and something else I couldn't name. "You should probably go," she said, not meeting my eyes. "It's been a long day." "Mom!" "Please, Michael, not today. I just want to. I can't do this right now." Her voice was tight, strained. "I just buried my husband. I don't have the energy for this." This, like I was a problem to be managed, a situation to be handled. "What did I do?" I asked, hating how small my voice sounded. "What did I do that was so terrible?" She finally looked at me, and for just a second, I saw something flicker in her eyes. Pain, maybe, or regret. But then it was gone, replaced by something harder. "You left," she said simply. "You left, and you never really came back. I visited, I called, You made your choice, Michael. You chose your life over this family. And now your father's gone, and I need the people who stayed." She walked away before I could respond. I stood there for another 10 minutes, waiting for someone, anyone, to approach me, to ask if I was okay, to acknowledge that I existed. Nobody did. So I left. I walked out of that church basement into the gray November afternoon, got into my rental car, and sat there in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Derek. "Sorry, man. It's complicated right now. Give it time." I didn't respond.
I drove back to the cheap motel where I was staying. I hadn't been invited to stay at my mother's house, and sat on the edge of the bed, still in my borrowed suit, trying to understand what had just happened.
I'd lost my father. That pain was enormous, crushing, the kind of grief that makes it hard to breathe. But I'd also lost something else. I'd lost the illusion that I had a family to come back to. The first week after the funeral, I called my mother 4 times. She didn't answer. I left voicemails, short, careful messages asking how she was doing, if she needed anything, if I could come help sort through my father's belongings. I kept my tone light, non-confrontational, like if I just stayed calm and reasonable enough, everything would go back to normal. She never called back. On the 8th day, I called the house phone, the old landline they'd kept for decades, the one my father refused to get rid of because what if the cell towers go down? My mother answered on the 3rd ring. "Hello? Mom, it's Michael." Silence. "I've been trying to reach you. I wanted to check in, see how you're—" "I'm fine, Michael. I was thinking I could come by this weekend, help you with anything you need. I know there's probably a lot to go through, and your Uncle Martin is handling all of that." I felt something cold settle in my stomach. Handling what? The estate, the house, everything. But I'm his son. I should be— "Martin knows what your father wanted. Mom, I have a right to be involved in—" "Do you?" Her voice was sharp now, cutting. "Do you really, Michael? You weren't here. You weren't here when he got sick. You weren't here when he was in pain, when he couldn't remember my name half the time, when he needed someone to help him to the bathroom in the middle of the night. You came for 3 days at the end. 3 days, after everything. I came as soon as you told me how bad it was. You said he was stable. You said I shouldn't have had to tell you anything. You should have known. You should have been here. I have a job, Mom. I have a life in Portland. I can't just—" "Exactly," she said, and I heard the finality in her voice. "You have a life in Portland, and we have ours here." She hung up. I stared at my phone for a long time after that. The thing is, she wasn't entirely wrong. I hadn't been there as much as I could have been. When my father first got diagnosed with early-onset dementia 3 years ago, I'd visited more frequently, once a month, sometimes twice. But as the disease progressed, as he started forgetting who I was, as the visits became harder and more painful, I'd started spacing them out. 2 months, 3 months, 6 months. I told myself it was because watching him deteriorate was too painful, that it was better to remember him as he was, that he wouldn't even know I was there half the time anyway. But the truth was simpler and uglier than that. I'd been afraid of watching him disappear, afraid of confronting my own inability to fix it, afraid of sitting in that house with my mother and the rest of the family, feeling like an outsider in my own father's final chapter. So I'd kept my distance, and they'd noticed. I went back to Portland the next day, returned the rental car, went back to work at the nonprofit, tried to slip back into my routine. But everything felt wrong. My apartment felt emptier than usual. My job, helping homeless families navigate the impossibly complex web of housing assistance, food stamps, and medical services, suddenly felt overwhelming in a way it hadn't before. Every interaction reminded me that I was helping strangers build support systems while my own had just collapsed. My colleague, Jennifer, noticed during our weekly team meeting.
"You okay?" she asked after I'd zoned out for the 3rd time while someone was presenting quarterly numbers. "Yeah, just still processing some stuff." She knew about my father. I'd taken bereavement leave, but I hadn't told her about the rest of it. How do you explain to someone that your family disowned you at a funeral? That night I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to a bar alone, not the craft brewery where my friends usually met up, but a dive bar 3 blocks from my apartment. The kind of place with sticky floors, a jukebox that still played CDs, and bartenders who didn't try to make conversation. I ordered a whiskey, then another. By the third one, I was looking through old photos on my phone. There was one from 8 years ago, at my college graduation. My father standing next to me in front of the university sign, his arm around my shoulders, both of us grinning. He'd driven 6 hours each way just to be there for the ceremony, even though he'd had to take an unpaid day off work. He'd been so proud. He'd told everyone at the family barbecue that summer that his son had a degree, that I was going to do something important. My Uncle Martin had made a joke about how I'd probably end up serving coffee with that liberal arts education. Everyone had laughed, including me at the time. I'd thought it was just family ribbing, good-natured teasing. But it wasn't. It was the beginning of them deciding I didn't belong anymore. I scrolled further back, a photo from when I was 16, holding up a trophy from a regional robotics competition. My father had helped me build the robot in the garage, staying up late on weekends even though he was exhausted from work. We'd won second place. He'd been more excited than I was. Another photo, Christmas, maybe 5 years ago. The whole family crammed into my grandparents' living room. I was on the far edge of the frame, partially cut off, while everyone else was centered. My cousins, my aunts and uncles, my mother and father. Even in the photo, I was being pushed to the margins. I'd never noticed it before. How many other signs had I missed?
"You look like you're having a rough night," the bartender said, refilling my water glass without me asking. "Rough month," I said. "Family stuff?" I nodded. "Yeah," he said, wiping down the bar. "That'll do it. Family's the only people who can make you feel like nothing without even trying." I almost laughed. "That's pretty accurate. Want some advice?" "Sure. Stop waiting for them to apologize. They won't. People who hurt you like that, they've already justified it to themselves. They've made you the villain in their story, and nothing you do is going to change that narrative." I looked at him. He was maybe 50, with graying hair and the kind of face that had seen a lot of hard years. "Speaking from experience?" I asked. 17 years since I talked to my brother," he said. "Best 17 years of my life." He moved down the bar to help another customer, leaving me with that. I finished my drink and went home. That night, lying in bed, I made a decision. I wasn't going to keep calling my mother. Wasn't going to keep trying to insert myself into a family that had already decided I didn't fit. Wasn't going to spend the next 10 years waiting for an apology or an explanation that would never come. I was going to let them go. It should have felt freeing. It should have felt like taking control. Instead, it just felt like losing.
3 weeks after the funeral, I got a call from a lawyer. His name was David Brennan, and he was handling my father's estate. "Mr. Sullivan, I'm calling regarding your father, Robert Sullivan's will. I'd like to schedule the time for you to come to my office to discuss the contents." I was surprised. I thought my uncle was handling everything. "Your uncle has been helpful with some of the logistics, but I represent your father's legal interests, and there are some specific provisions that require your direct involvement." We scheduled a meeting for the following Thursday. I flew back to Spokane, my hometown, the place I'd spent 18 years before college, and drove to the lawyer's office in a modest building downtown. The receptionist led me to a conference room where David Brennan was waiting, a man in his 60s with wire-rimmed glasses and a kind, professional demeanor. "Thank you for coming, Michael. I know this isn't easy. What's this about?" He opened a folder. "Your father updated his will about 8 months ago. He was very specific about certain things. First, I need to inform you that he left you his truck, the 1987 Ford F-150 he restored, and his entire collection of tools from the garage. He also established a small trust fund for you, approximately $28,000, from a life insurance policy he'd maintained separately from the family." I felt my throat tighten. The truck. He'd spent 3 years restoring that truck, and I'd helped him with it during high school. We'd worked on it together every weekend, learning as we went, making mistakes, figuring it out. He'd always said it would be mine someday. "There's something else," Brennan continued. "Your father left a letter. He asked that I give it to you personally." He slid an envelope across the table.
It was addressed to me in my father's handwriting, shaky, uneven, probably written during one of his clearer moments near the end. "Would you like privacy?" Brennan asked. "No, I'll read it later. There's one more thing. Your father's house and the remainder of his estate were left to your mother, as expected. However, there was a specific clause. He requested that you be given the opportunity to go through his personal belongings before anything is donated or discarded. He wanted you to have first choice of anything that had sentimental value. Does my mother know about this? I informed her last week. She wasn't pleased, but it's legally binding."
When can I do this?
"Whenever you're ready, but I'd recommend sooner rather than later. Your uncle has been pressuring your mother to clear out the house quickly so she can consider selling." Of course he was. I left the lawyer's office with the letter in my pocket and drove to a park near my old high school. I sat in the rental car for 15 minutes, staring at the envelope before I finally opened it. "Michael, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And I'm sorry I didn't get to say goodbye the way I wanted to. The disease took a lot from me, but it didn't take how I felt about you. I know things have been hard between you and the family. I know they don't understand why you left, and I know you felt like you don't belong for a long time. But I want you to know something. You leaving was the bravest thing I ever saw you do. You wanted more than what we could give you here. You wanted to help people in ways I never knew how to. You wanted to learn and grow and be something different, and I was proud of you for that. I still am. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you better from the rest of them. I'm sorry I didn't stand up more when they made you feel small. I thought if I kept us all together, it would work itself out, but I was wrong. Don't let them make you feel like you failed. You didn't. You just wanted a different life, and there's nothing wrong with that. The truck is yours. I know you remember working on it with me. Every time I drove it, I thought about those weekends in the garage with you, teaching you about engines and listening to you talk about your dreams. Those were some of the best times of my life. Take care of yourself, son. Be happy. And don't spend your life trying to earn the approval of people who were never going to give it. I love you. I always did. Dad." I sat in that car and cried for the first time since he died. Not the silent, swallowed grief I'd carried through the funeral. Real crying. Ugly, heaving sobs that hurt my chest and made it hard to breathe. When I was done, I called my mother. She answered on the first ring.
The lawyer said I can come by and go through Dad's things. I know. When's a good time? Tomorrow. Come in the morning. I'll be out visiting your aunt. She hung up without saying goodbye. The next morning, I drove to the house where I'd grown up. A modest two-story in a working-class neighborhood with mature trees and small, well-maintained yards. My father's truck was in the driveway, covered with a tarp. I used my old key. It still worked. The house smelled the same. Coffee, old wood, the faint scent of motor oil that never quite left my father's clothes, but it felt different. Emptier, like the life had been drained out of it. I went upstairs to my father's bedroom. My mother had already started packing some of his clothes into boxes. The closet was half empty. His dresser drawers were open, mostly cleared out. It looked like she was trying to erase him as quickly as possible, like keeping his things around was too painful. I understood that, but it still hurt to see. I went through his nightstand, found an old watch I'd given him for Father's Day when I was 12. Cheap, probably bought with my allowance, but he'd worn it for years. I pocketed it. In the garage, his tools were organized exactly as he'd left them. I spent 2 hours out there, just looking at everything, remembering which projects we'd used each tool for. I took a few things. His favorite hammer, the socket set we'd bought together, a leather tool belt that still had his initials stamped into it. I found a box on a high shelf I'd never noticed before. Inside were things from my childhood, report cards, drawings I'd made in elementary school, the trophy from the robotics competition, photos from school events. He'd kept all of it. There was also a folder of letters I'd sent him from college and later from Portland. I hadn't written many, maybe a dozen over the years, but he'd kept every single one. At the bottom of the box was a newspaper clipping, an article from the local Spokane paper from 3 years ago about the nonprofit I worked for receiving a community service award. I'd been quoted in it, just one line about our mission. Someone had highlighted my name. He'd been following my work, even when I wasn't there, even when I thought he was too deep in his illness to understand what I was doing. He'd been proud of me.
I was loading the last box into my rental car when a vehicle pulled up, my Uncle Martin's truck. He got out, looking surprised to see me. "What are you doing here?" "Going through Dad's things. The will gave me the right. Your mother didn't mention you'd be here today. She knew." He looked at the boxes in my car, at the tools I'd taken. His expression hardened. "You're really going to take his stuff? After everything?" "After everything?" I repeated. "What does that mean?" "You know what it means. You weren't here, Michael. You can't just show up now, and he left these things to me, in his will, legally. That truck alone is worth 15 grand restored. That money should go to your mother, not what? Not to his son? You stopped being his son when you decided this family wasn't good enough for you." I felt something snap inside me. Not into anger exactly, into clarity. "You never wanted me here," I said quietly. "Any of you. I was never the right kind of son, the right kind of cousin. I didn't want to work in the business. I went to college. I moved away, and all of that was unforgivable to you. You abandoned us. I built a life. That's not the same thing. You built a life that didn't include us, because you never made room for it." My voice was louder now. "Every time I tried to talk about my work, you mocked it. Every time I visited, you made jokes about my choices. You spent years making me feel like I didn't belong, and then you got mad when I stopped trying to. Your father was heartbroken. My father wrote me a letter," I said, "and in it he told me he was proud of me. He told me leaving was brave, so don't stand there and tell me what my father felt. You don't get to do that." Martin's face reddened. "You're not taking that truck." "Yes, I am. It's mine, legally. And if you try to stop me, I'll have the lawyer handle it." I got in my car and started the engine. Martin stood in the driveway, glaring, but he didn't move to block me. I drove away and didn't look back. I had the truck shipped to Portland 2 weeks later. It cost me $800, money I didn't really have, but I didn't care. I wasn't leaving it behind. When it arrived, I spent a weekend cleaning it, checking the engine, making sure everything still worked. It did. My father had maintained it perfectly, right up until he couldn't anymore. Driving it felt like having him back, just a little. I didn't hear from my mother for 2 months. Then, on what would have been my father's 65th birthday, she called. "Michael." "Mom?" "I wanted to let you know that we're selling the house. The market's good right now, and I can't afford to keep it." "Okay." "Martin found a buyer. We should close by the end of the month." "Good." Silence. "Is that all you have to say?" she asked. "What do you want me to say?" "I don't know. Maybe something about how you feel about losing the house you grew up in." I thought about that, about the house, the memories, the childhood that felt both close and impossibly distant. "I lost that house a long time ago, Mom. This is just making it official." "That's not fair." "Isn't it?" I kept my voice even, calm. "You told me to leave. You told me I wasn't immediate family. You let everyone erase me at Dad's funeral. So yeah, I lost that house. I lost all of it. And I'm okay with that now. I was grieving. So was I. It's different for a wife. I lost my father,
Don't tell me it's different. Don't tell me my grief counts less because I wasn't there every single day. I loved him, and he knew that. That's enough." She was quiet for a long time. "I don't know how to fix this," she finally said, and her voice sounded small, lost. "I don't think you can. So that's it? We just never speak again? I don't know, Mom. Maybe. Or maybe we figure out something different, but it's not going to be what it was. It can't be. He wouldn't want this. Dad told me in his letter not to spend my life trying to earn approval from people who were never going to give it. I think that includes you." I heard her breath catch. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm sorry for what I said at the funeral. I'm sorry for not defending you. I'm sorry for not being strong enough to stand up to them." It was the first time she'd apologized. It should have felt like more. "Thank you," I said. "I appreciate that. Can we try to have some kind of relationship? I don't know. Maybe. But it has to be different. I'm not going to keep trying to fit into a space that was never built for me." "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay." We talked for a few more minutes. Careful, surface-level things. The weather, her health, my job. Nothing deep, nothing that hurt. When we hung up, I didn't feel fixed. I didn't feel like everything was resolved. But I felt like maybe, eventually, we could find something. Not the family I'd wanted, not the belonging I'd once hoped for, but something honest, something real. That night, I drove the truck to the coast, a 2-hour drive from Portland to a small rocky beach I'd discovered the previous summer. I parked and walked down to the water, letting the cold Pacific wind hit my face. I thought about my father, about the version of himself he'd been before the disease, and the version I'd known in pieces throughout my life. The man who worked with his hands, who fixed things, who taught me to change oil and wire a light switch and measure twice, cut once. The man who loved me even when I disappointed his family. The man who saw something in me worth being proud of. I pulled out my phone and looked at the photo from my college graduation one more time, his arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. "I miss you," I said out loud to no one, "but I think I finally understand what you were trying to tell me." The wind carried the words away. Over the next 6 months, things changed slowly. My mother and I started talking every few weeks, short calls, checking in. She told me about her life, her book club, her part-time job at the library, her friends. I told her about my work, about the families I was helping, about the small victories that made the hard days worth it. We didn't talk about the rest of the family. That door stayed closed. My Uncle Martin sent me a text once, "Your mother misses you." I didn't respond. Derek reached out on my birthday. "Hope you're doing okay, man." I thanked him, but didn't engage further. Patricia never contacted me at all. I was okay with that. At work, I got promoted to program director. More responsibility, better pay, a chance to actually shape how we served our community. I threw myself into it, building partnerships with local housing authorities, training new caseworkers, advocating for policy changes that would make the system less hostile to the people who needed it most. I dated someone for a while, a teacher named Rachel, who I met through a friend. It didn't work out. She wanted more commitment than I was ready for, more certainty about the future, but it was good while it lasted. It reminded me I could let people in, that I didn't have to carry everything alone. I started seeing a therapist. I'd resisted it for a long time, thinking I could handle it on my own, but my friend Jennifer finally convinced me. "You're helping everyone else put their lives together," she'd said. "Maybe you should let someone help you do the same." Dr. Patel was a soft-spoken woman in her 50s who specialized in family trauma.
She didn't try to fix me or tell me what to do, she just listened. And slowly, over months of weekly sessions, I started to untangle all the things I'd carried for so long. The guilt about not being there more for my father. The shame about leaving the family. The anger at being erased. The grief that had nowhere to go. You spent your whole life trying to be who they wanted you to be, Dr. Patel said during one session. And when you finally chose yourself, they punished you for it. That's not your failure, that's theirs. Then why does it still hurt? Because you loved them, and you wanted them to love you back the way you needed. That's not weakness, that's human. 1 year after my father's funeral, I drove the truck back to Spokane. Not to see my family, just to visit his grave. I brought flowers, nothing fancy, just a simple bouquet from a grocery store, and I sat on the grass next to his headstone for a long time. "I'm doing okay, Dad," I said quietly. "I'm still in Portland, still doing the work. I got promoted. You'd probably make a joke about me being someone's boss now." The cemetery was quiet, just birds and wind and the distant sound of traffic. I think about what you said in the letter a lot, about being brave. I didn't feel brave, I just felt lost. But I think I understand now. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is choose yourself, even when everyone tells you you're wrong for it.
I traced his name on the headstone. Robert James Sullivan, beloved husband and father. I wish you were here. I wish I could call you and tell you about my life and hear you tell me you're proud of me. But I carry you with me. Every time I drive the truck, every time I use your tools, every time I help someone who feels invisible the way I felt, you're there. I stayed for another hour, just sitting there, feeling close to him in a way I hadn't since he got sick. When I left, I felt lighter somehow. Not fixed, not whole, but closer to okay. On the drive back to Portland, I stopped at a diner in a small town along the highway. It was the kind of place my father would have loved. Vinyl booths, laminated menus, coffee that tasted like it had been sitting for hours. An older waitress came to my table. "What can I get you, honey?" I ordered the meatloaf special. It's what my father always ordered at places like this. While I waited for the food, I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts. I stopped at my mother's name. I could call her, tell her I'd visited the grave, try to build something. Or I could leave it alone, let the distance stay, stop trying to force connection where there wasn't foundation. I put the phone away. Maybe someday, but not yet. The food came, and I ate slowly, watching the highway through the window. Trucks of cars passing by, everyone heading somewhere. Everyone carrying their own stories. I thought about all the people I'd helped over the past year. The single mother who'd finally gotten stable housing after 6 months of applications and rejections. The veteran who'd found a job and a place to live after years of homelessness. The teenager who'd aged out of foster care and just needed someone to help him navigate the system. I'd been there for them. I'd seen them. I'd fought for them when nobody else would. And maybe that was enough. Maybe I didn't need my family's approval to know I mattered. Maybe I'd been enough all along. I paid the check, left a generous tip, and walked back to the truck. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, just being present.
Then I got in the truck, turned on the engine, and headed home. Not to the place I grew up, to the life I'd built, to the person I'd become. And for the first time in a long time, that felt like exactly where I was supposed to be.